Like, subscribe, and hype the video. Also, leave a comment on any topics you want to hear about in the future. Okay, let's dive in. In our last episode, we walked through what the Big Bang actually was, the expansion of space itself from an incomprehensibly hot, dense initial state, confirmed by multiple independent lines of evidence that have held up to over 60 years of increasingly rigorous testing. The science of what happened after the Big Bang is extraordinarily well established. But there's one question the model itself doesn't answer, and it's the first question almost everyone asks: what came before? What caused the Big Bang? What existed, if anything, before time and space began? Today we're going there, into the scientific proposals for what might have preceded the Big Bang, the deep philosophical problems with even asking the question, the conspiracy theories that claim the whole thing is wrong, and why, in this final episode of the series, the most honest answer science can give is the most important thing about it. Here's the deepest philosophical problem with the question of what came before the Big Bang, and it's one that physics and philosophy have both been grappling with for decades. The question assumes that before is a meaningful concept in the context we're applying it to. But time, according to our best current understanding, is not a fixed eternal backdrop against which events occur. Time is part of the fabric of space-time, which the Big Bang brought into existence. If time itself began at the Big Bang, then before the Big Bang may be as meaningless a phrase as north of the North Pole. This isn't a dodge or a cover-up. It's a genuine, deeply considered position held by physicists including Stephen Hawking, who articulated it clearly in his book, A Brief History of Time. Asking what came before the Big Bang may be like asking what's south of the South Pole. The question feels like it should have an answer, but it's applying a concept in a context where that concept doesn't apply. That said, this answer has never fully satisfied either physicists or philosophers, and several serious scientific frameworks have been developed that try to push past it by redefining what before might mean in a context where time itself had an origin. Like, subscribe, and hype the video. And let's get into what those frameworks actually say. Despite the philosophical challenges, physicists have developed several serious scientific frameworks that attempt to describe what might have preceded or generated our Big Bang, each of them reaching into territory where our current theories become uncertain but not completely silent. The first is the Hartle-Hawking no-boundary proposal, developed by Stephen Hawking and James Hartle in 1983. This framework uses a mathematical technique called imaginary time, not fictional time, but a specific mathematical transformation that makes the equations of quantum gravity tractable, and proposes that the universe has no boundary in time, similar to how a sphere has no edge. In this picture, asking what came before the Big Bang is like asking what's south of the South Pole. The question assumes a boundary that the geometry doesn't actually have. The universe simply exists, described by a quantum wave function that encompasses all of space-time without requiring an external cause or a prior state. The second proposal is the ekpyrotic or cyclic universe model, developed by Paul Steinhardt and Neil Turok. In this framework, our universe exists on a three-dimensional membrane, a brane, floating in a higher dimensional space alongside another brane. The Big Bang in this model was the result of these two branes colliding, and the universe cycles through repeated expansions and contractions, with each collision producing a new Big Bang. In this picture, there was no absolute beginning. There was a previous cycle, and before that another, potentially stretching back infinitely. The third is the eternal inflation picture we covered in our multiverse episode, where an eternally inflating background space generates Big Bangs continuously, with our universe being one of many that have been produced this way, embedded in an infinite, never-ending process with no beginning. Now let's talk about the conspiracy theories, because the Big Bang, as the most fundamental and comprehensive scientific account of our universe's origin, attracts some of the most sweeping and ambitious challenges of any topic we've covered in this entire series. The most common version claims the Big Bang is an invention of mainstream science designed to exclude alternative origin stories, particularly religious or spiritual accounts of creation, by establishing a materialist narrative that monopolizes scientific authority. A related version claims that the evidence for the Big Bang is fabricated or misinterpreted, that the cosmic microwave background is not actually an afterglow of the early universe, and that the observed expansion of the universe has alternative explanations that mainstream cosmology refuses to consider. These claims face the same fundamental problem as every conspiracy theory we've fact-checked across this entire series. The evidence for the Big Bang comes from multiple, completely independent measurement techniques, using completely different instruments, in research programs run by scientists from dozens of different countries with different cultural, religious, and political backgrounds, none of whom have any coherent shared motive to fabricate or distort the same story. The CMB was predicted theoretically, then detected by accident by engineers working on a completely different problem, then precisely mapped by multiple independent satellite missions decades apart. The primordial helium abundance was calculated from first principles, then confirmed by independent stellar spectroscopy. The Hubble expansion was discovered observationally, then confirmed by multiple independent distance measurement methods using completely different physics. For the Big Bang to be wrong in a fundamental way, not just requiring refinement but actually wrong about the basic picture, would require all of these independent lines of evidence to be simultaneously wrong in a coordinated way, a coincidence that's harder to believe than the science itself. Like, subscribe, and hype the video, and let's talk about the version of this that comes from an unexpected direction. It's worth distinguishing between conspiracy theories about the Big Bang and legitimate scientific challenges to the standard cosmological model, because there are real researchers with real credentials who have proposed serious modifications or alternatives that deserve honest treatment. The challenges from JWST observations about early galaxy formation that we covered in our James Webb episode represent a real, ongoing, openly debated scientific puzzle that could require modifications to the standard model of cosmology. Researchers including Subir Sarkar at Oxford have published work questioning some aspects of the evidence for the accelerating expansion of the universe, the discovery that led to dark energy, arguing that the statistical analysis of the original supernova data contained potential biases. These challenges have been published, debated, and responded to in the open literature. The response from the broader community has generally been that the accelerating expansion is confirmed by multiple independent lines of evidence beyond just supernovae, but the challenge was engaged with seriously rather than dismissed. This is how science is supposed to work. The Big Bang model is extraordinarily well supported, but it's not immune to evidence-based challenge, and the community evaluates those challenges on their merits. The distinction between this kind of legitimate scientific debate and conspiracy theories is precisely that legitimate challenges engage with the evidence, make testable predictions, and submit to peer review, rather than claiming the entire edifice is a fabrication without engaging with the specific evidence that supports it. Here's what the Big Bang model genuinely doesn't explain, stated honestly and directly, because this series has always tried to be honest about the limits of what we know alongside the things we do know. We don't know what caused the Big Bang. We don't know whether the question even has an answer in any meaningful sense. We don't know what happened before the Planck time, the first 10 to the negative 43 seconds, because our physics breaks down completely in that regime, and every framework we try to apply produces nonsensical results. We don't know whether our Big Bang was the first and only one, or one of many in a cyclic or inflationary multiverse. We don't know why matter won over antimatter in that first second, or what the nature of the dark matter and dark energy that make up 95% of the universe actually is. These are genuine, significant gaps in our knowledge. They're not evidence that the Big Bang didn't happen. The evidence that it did happen is overwhelming and precise. They're evidence that the universe is more complicated and more interesting than any single framework can fully describe, and that the most extraordinary scientific discoveries of the next century are probably waiting in exactly these gaps. So here's where this entire series ends. not with an answer, but with the most important thing about the questions. We live inside a universe that is 13.8 billion years old, 93 billion light-years across in its observable extent, containing 2 trillion galaxies, each with hundreds of billions of stars. We know precisely what it was doing 380,000 years after its birth, because we can still see the light from that moment in every direction we look. We know what the first 3 minutes of cosmic history produced because we can measure it in the oldest stars. We know the expansion is accelerating, even if we don't know what's driving it. We know something invisible makes up 95% of everything, even if we haven't directly detected it. And there are questions we genuinely cannot answer yet. What came before? What dark matter is? Whether we're alone? Whether this is the only universe? Whether the experience of consciousness that allows us to ask these questions is something the universe is doing on purpose, or something it stumbled into by accident, or something that doesn't map meaningfully onto either of those descriptions. What makes this the right note to end on is this. Every single one of those open questions is being actively investigated right now by real people, using real instruments, publishing real results in open literature that anyone in the world can read. The universe isn't finished revealing itself, and neither are we. Like, subscribe and hype the video. Drop a comment with the topic you want us to cover next, because this series isn't over. I'll see you in the next one.